Hey! What's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? And listen, this is Call It What You Want. You know that. That's why you're here. I'm Jimmy Conrad, and I'm not by myself this time around. I know, much to the chagrin of people that want to see me go solo, have a solo career like Beyonce and Destiny's Child. But I got Mike Grella with me right now. Mike Grella, welcome. Your debut on Call It What You Want. Thank you for hanging out with me today.
Jimmy, I've been on here before. I made a debut before on here.
But as a guest, though. As a guest,
to be fair,
like
to be fair, it was short.
co-host.
Yeah, and as a guest, and there's been some. We got Miola on here, Jesse Marsh. We got you. I mean, I know we got Charlie. So I'm honored to be on it, man. Jamie, can't wait.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So what's interesting for me is that we finally, and I wrote it on that board behind me, finally have a game that Mauricio Pochettino is going to coach for the U.S. men's national team. If you would have told me 5 months ago that this was a reality, that we would have Mauricio Pochettino coaching for us in a real game, even though it's a friendly, in a real game, though, I would have been like, dude, what are you smoking? What are you drinking? Get out of here. Are you feeling the same way as me?
I just think for what we were looking for and what U.S. Soccer was looking for and the fans as well, it couldn't have been more perfect. Now, I'm not saying like he's the perfect man for the job. What I'm saying is like what we were looking for. We're looking for a European coach with European experience that has some charisma that can get these guys going because we know we have talented players. I mean, it just kind of fit like a perfect puzzle piece. So I'm excited to see him get going. And I watched some clips of the first training session and his interactions with the players. So really exciting.
Yeah, he's not taking any shit. I love that.
Hey,
it's like very clear identity. Like, this is what we're doing.
He's tough. And he's a tough guy, man. And I think I'm not sure exactly who said it, but I think players are gonna be held accountable. And that's the most important thing at that level.
And being consistent with that accountability, right? Because there are times where we've been around coaches that do it, where you make exceptions for your quote unquote star players. But when they're not held accountable as well, then that starts to, I don't know, some seeds of resentment start to grow from the other players that aren't considered the stars, more of the water carriers, like me in particular. Not that I was ever like that. I'm always a team first guy, but I could see how that could permeate through the rest of the group if not everybody's being held to that same standard.
Yeah, and I've had that in my career. I think this happens a lot in the MLS when I was playing in the MLS was that you got guys in the locker room that are obviously making a lot of money, but are also there's other guys that are on different levels. And at times maybe managers are scared to go at them or scared to sort of challenge them because they don't know where it can go and it could really derail the whole thing you're trying to do. But I'll never forget Jesse Marsh grabbing Brad aside or even in front of the whole group and saying, listen, that's not good enough. This performance is not good enough. You got to get across the near post here or whatever it was for him. And that sent a message to the entire group is like, whoa, if he's going at that like Brad, then we all have to really raise our level. And we're all going to be held accountable. So it's a good feeling, I think, that when okay, you've got to perform, you've got to compete, and there's competition for spots. That's what the healthy environment that you want,
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think it's a difficult ask sometimes of coaches, especially national team coaches, where you want to come in and really establish a rapport. And not necessarily be friends with the guys, but be friendly. And there's a really delicate balance, I think, from like, hey, I'm going to be asking you to do this. And then also, we have to get some stuff done, right? And I want to be friendly with you as well. Anyway, we're going to get into it some more. Hit like and subscribe, baby, because we're about to get started. Hi, hello, and welcome to your favorite average to good podcast, Call It What You Want. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside Mike Grella, and we are getting after it today, everybody, because Mauricio Pochettino, the new coach for the U.S. men's national team, is going to be managing his first game in charge against Panama, and then a couple days later against Mexico. We're going to preview the Panama game for you today. We're going to talk about all the players, our projected starting 11s, and all the other news and notes that you need to know ahead of this particular game. His first camp in charge. Mike Grella, great to see you as always. How are you feeling about this? Because there's just something very exciting, at least for me, to have the players finally hear a new voice, to have somewhat of a new direction of how we want to play.
Yeah, definitely. I think the most important thing is it's a friendly, but the most important thing is to see a change in identity in the way that we play. And I think it's going to be night and day from the friendlies we saw not too long ago that they were some of the worst performances I've ever seen these players playing. So just to see something different, a change of identity, even like I had Berhalter at the end of Columbus. I had him for a year. We played a distinct brand of football that I don't think he was ever able to implement into the team, because every time I watch the national team play, it didn't really seem like they had a definite, a clear style of play. So that's the first thing I'm going to look for watching Pochettino is, first of all, the attention to detail, the discipline of the players, the energy levels, and commitment, right? Those things are very important, things that they all talked about. But the other thing that I want to see is, what are they going to play like? What's the style going to look like? Is it going to be attacking? Is it going to be defensive? Is it going to be more pragmatic? Is it going to play with a back four, back five? I'm really excited to see that soccer side of it.
I'm excited to dive into this a little bit more with you, Mike Grella. But first, we have to give you your flowers. For everybody that doesn't know Mike Grella, this guy's a baller. Okay, had a 10-year pro career in England, in Denmark, and MLS. He played for Leeds United and Brentford, and actually scored 4 goals in a game for Brentford in their 6-0 win over Bournemouth back in 2011. He won the 2015 Supporters Shield with the New York Red Bulls, scored the fastest goal in MLS history against the Philadelphia Union. 7 seconds. How is that even possible? I've got a lot of questions of that defending there from Philadelphia. Also, he made Frank Lampard. I wish I could roll that clip for you. And you scored the best goal I've ever seen in TST history this past year with Pat McAfee's team. Mike Grella, we are thrilled to have you on the show. I just wanted to let everybody know that you're a pretty decorated player, my friend.
Jimmy, it's funny, man. I got the funniest story. I was in San Siro covering Milan-Liverpool, and Frank Lampard's there, obviously, and he's another guy that's just like unbelievable character. With the career he had speaks for itself. And he walks over to me. I don't think he would remember me, so I just went over and said, "Hey, well, how's it going? Like, I don't know if you remember me." And he looks at me and he goes, "I'll never forget it." That's all he said.
And he's got him so clean.
He's the ultimate gentleman. I can't tell you how nice he is, for fans who probably they never really got to meet him or we see him on that side of the football, but he's such an awesome guy. So I got to see him, and he remembers it. He remembers it well. So, but it was a little bit half luck, half skill. But thank you for the intro, Jimmy. Appreciate it.
Of course. What's interesting about Frank Lampard and that generation of players for England, they don't seem to be turning out to be very good managers. And I think about Frank Lampard and Wayne Rooney in particular, just doesn't really seem like it's worked out for them so far. Maybe that changes as they gain some more experience, but we'll have to wait and see. All right, talking about this game, U.S. men's national team versus Panama, and really this camp overall, we had the opportunity to get some sound bites from some of the players that have been experiencing the first day in particular of Mauricio Pochettino. We're going to hear from Brenden Aaronson and Josh Sargent right now. Let's take a listen.
One thing that we know for sure that we've really rehashed is, the intensity of what we want to play at. We want to play at a high intensity. We want to play in the other team's half. We want to have possession of the ball. And, yeah, I think what he wants is just a confident team, and that's what we're going to be. And, yeah, I mean, is there anything else to add to that?
No, I think he said we're going to go over a bit more tactical stuff tomorrow and the next day. But just a general message of, anything we do, whether with the ball or against the ball, he wants it to be intense. If we lose the ball, recover it right away. That's been a big, message so far.
All right, hearing from Josh Sargent there second and Brenden Aaronson first for those that aren't watching the Glosso Network. If you're hanging out with us or listening to it on podcast platform of choice, we appreciate you hanging and spending some time with us as we break everything down. So, Grella, I hear these thoughts about how we want to play, both with and against the ball. And then I hear what you were saying before about Gregg Berhalter. He had a very distinct style of how he wanted to play at the club level, but very similar to Gregg Berhalter. Mauricio Pochettino only has club experience. Sometimes it's not easy to translate a club style of play when you're around the team day in and day out and can continue to reinforce that messaging. Whereas out of the national team, it's just a little bit different. So I think obviously the players are eager and thirsty and hungry to want something new, and I think it's going to be reflected in how we play. But I just don't know how easy it's going to be for Mauricio Pochettino to get his messaging across, his methodology across, however you want to say it. But I'm excited that not only those two players, Jedi Robinson said something similar, Tim Reyna said something similar after this day one. Everything has been intense, and I love it. And I'm very curious to see how that plays out against Panama in this first game.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, because Pochettino's never coached a national team, and with Berhalter, I got to spend a year with him. I feel very fortunate that I did, because I learned a lot. I think about the tactical side of football. People obviously very down on him with the national team and very down on him when he was on the way out. And I always made it the point to say how good he was at managing and how much attention to detail that he pays. I mean, this guy every single day didn't sleep. He would think of new ways to train, new ways to look at it. Any advantage he could get, he would try it tactically. There was times I was very frustrated with him. Like, I'll tell you like a personal story is he's just so detailed that it would drive me crazy at times. He would stop like a 4v4 and like bring out a tactical board and be like, "Hey, don't you think you should be set up in a diamond in this 4v4?" And I'm just like track guys. And it's just like 1 against 1. Like, you track guys, and if you could pass a guy and you pass it on. So he always thought about in great detail. I think what Pochettino is going to try to do, from what I hear, I keep hearing intensity. I keep hearing whatever we do on the ball or off the ball. I think he's trying to simplify the message. I think with the national team, you have to do that. Obviously, other managers will know more than me, but you don't get a lot of time with the managers, and you don't get a lot of time to sit in sort of groove really complex tactics, both on and off the ball. So I think with international football, you have to be organized defensively, and there has to be unbelievable level of competition for spots. Guys have to know what it means at the end of the day to wear the badge and to play for the country.
Yeah, what's interesting is that Marcelo Bielsa is a mentor of Mauricio Pochettino. So when I think about intensity and playing high up the field and being hard to play against, especially against the ball, that all echoes the sentiments and messaging that I hear from Marcelo Bielsa as well. So because Marcelo Bielsa has coached at the club level and also coached internationally, he's currently the Uruguay coach, I assume that Pochettino has reached out to Marcelo Bielsa to say, "Hey, what should I do in this transition? It's not club, it's a national team." And I bet you he's gotten some great insight there. So that's interesting. Now, speaking of Marcelo Bielsa, he managed at Leeds before Jesse Marsh, one of our former co-hosts here, call it what you want. And Brendan Aaronson is at Leeds. He came back. Well, he was there. Then he left when they got relegated to go on loan to Union Berlin, to give everybody some context to the soundbite we're going to hear from him in a second. And he left to go to Union Berlin in Bundesliga and didn't suffer with them when they got relegated. And a lot of fans held that against Brendan Aaronson. So now he came back, and it's been unbelievable. He's playing the number 10 spot. He just got named Player of the Month. I mean, what is awesome? Anyway, let's hear from Brendan Aaronson about his experience with Leeds.
Going back to Leeds was, it was, of course, one that took decisions. And I think for me it was, I had unfinished business at Leeds, and just a lot of things pointed me going back to Leeds, and I think that was the biggest thing for me. It was like a feeling and wanting to go back and prove myself again. And I think since I've come back, I would say the first couple of weeks were pretty difficult mentally. It's not easy when you come back, and it's tough because you might see some fans getting upset with you, and it's just difficult. You got to reprove yourself again. But I'm proud of myself. I've come back and done really well. I mean, I won Player of the Month, which is really good for me, and it was a really great start. And now I just want to keep building and keep scoring and assisting, and just keep getting better.
Yeah, I love that and his attitude to go back into a difficult situation and try to fight it out, Brendan Aaronson. Now, you played at Leeds, Mike Grella, and you've played in front of those fans who can be very hard to please at times. Not like most fans, but Leeds fans seem to be extra special in that end. I got to see a game there against Barnsley in the League Cup when Jesse was still in charge, and they won that night 3-1. So it was awesome. It was a really cool experience. But I could imagine if you don't win and if you don't play well, it could not be as pleasant. Tell us about your experience at Leeds and about Brendan Aaronson and his performance so far.
Yeah, it was hilarious to see that soundbite, to see Aaronson say, "I won Player of the Month," and Sergeants laugh at it. It's actually hilarious. But I think for people watching that don't really understand Leeds or know Leeds, it's probably one of the bigger clubs in England. It's like a top 8 club, I say, top 6 club in England when you look at infrastructure, history, fan base. They are a fan base that's so committed to the club. And they require, or they demand, that you have to give 110%. So I think that's important. From Aaronson's perspective, to join Leeds, I think it was a good move for him, because not only has he had a good start, but they're the favorites to go up. They're the best team in the championship, arguably. They play a brand of football that really suits him. They're on the front foot. They can counter really quickly. They play between the lines into him a lot. So I think it was a really good fit for him. And now Aaronson is a guy that's been like, you watch him play in training, you watch his tools and how sharp he is and how quick he is. And he can take guys 1v1. He can play between the lines. He can find passes. He can finish, brings big energy, high intensity. but he just was never able to really affect the bottom line by the stats and the goals and assists. And he starts out now with 2 goals and an assist, and he looks really good. So if he can get up to 10 goals and 10 assists, and I'm not a big stat guy, but at the end of the day, you do have to affect the bottom line. If he can get there, he's going to be a guy that's so important for not only for Leeds, but for the national team and also for himself. I think he needs to prove to himself, because now, whatever is it, 6-7 seasons at the highest levels, he hasn't really done it. So I think him having a big season this season, he's had the great start. He can follow through and have a good season. I think he'll prove also to himself. I think he'll grow a lot in that way as well. But he's such an important piece, his development and his confidence moving forward for the national team.
Yeah, and I think it's natural to expect he's going to have a dip at some point this season, but we could argue he had a dip kind of leading into the season with Leeds, and he figured out a way to take the responsibility and accountability of maybe running away when he went to Union Berlin, and now he comes back, and as he said, he had unfinished business. So it's very cool to see him playing so well, and I hope that he can maintain it. But I know now, or he probably knows now, that if it doesn't go well for a little bit, he knows how to fight through it, and that's really important for a player, because you're going to have your dips throughout your career. Well, speaking of Brenden Aaronson, let's get into our projected starting 11 that we want to see, or we expect to see, against Panama. Where is he going to be? Will they play him out wide? Will they play him underneath, just like where he's playing with Leeds? That's the big question. But right now, this is what we have. For everybody that can't see it, I'm going to name all the players. Patrick Schulte will be in goal, plays for the Columbus Crew. On the left, Jedi Robinson. Tim Ream and Mark McKenzie will be the 2 center backs. This is a 4-3-3, though it could switch into a 4-2-3-1 potentially. Joe Scally on the right. Weston McKennie and Aiden Morris being those 2 quote-unquote holding midfielders. Brenden Aaronson at the 10 spot. Haji Wright at left wing. Christian Pulisic on the right. And Josh Sargent, who could take advantage of Flo Balogun not being available due to injury, who is red hot, 3 goals in 3 straight games for Monaco. Josh Sargent is going to be in the number 9 spot. That's what we're projecting. That's what we're hearing. And I'm kind of curious about your thoughts about that projected 11, Mike Grella, because there is some conversation I think that needs to be had about, do you want to go with Marlon Fossey out at the right back spot because he's a little bit more like for like with Serginho Dest, likes to get forward, former winger, right? That's now kind of moving back. Joe Scally, a little bit more defensive-minded. Tim Ream, a little bit older, but maybe you want a little experience in your first game in charge. Everywhere else seems pretty solid. Maybe Schulte in goal, or some you want Matt Turner instead. Christian Pulisic does a lot of damage from the left into the right, but with Milan, he's been playing all over the place, so he just wants to be on the field and he'll make an impact. But anything that you're seeing there that you would maybe change?
I see incredible balance in the team. I see full want to attack that are super talented, and I think also that's another discussion. But fullbacks in the modern day are like, that's the position that I think has changed the most over the last 15, 20 years. Fullbacks are expected to like be some of the most creative attacking players. They have a lot of possession, and depending on how vertical they get, depends on who you'd play, right? If you want an old school guy that's going to connect to the line more and be defensive, then you go with someone else. If you want guys that fly forward, then I think we have that balance in the back line. Then you have the experience of Ream there also. He's 37 years old now, so he's getting up there, but I think it's important what he can bring early on at Pochettino's time with us, with the team. And so in the midfield also is the balance, right? You got Aiden Morris and McKennie that are going to just suck up first ball, second balls, win things, just be able to compete. That gives Aaronson a little bit more freedom to go forward. And then even when you look at Pulisic's probably the more technical winger, come inside. I mean, he's just been on fire. Everything he touches, he's scoring goals in totally different ways. And then you have Haji Wright on the other side, who's more direct, more vertical than Pulisic. So, and then up top, of course, Sargent. For those who haven't watched Sargent recently, we have the EFL rights now. We cover him every Saturday. You guys should tune into that show. It's really good. But we cover a lot of Sargent, and the stuff he's doing, the way he can drop into the midfield and link play. So his first 3-4 yards, he's been really good. Like when you talk about, I think U.S. players, I think you always say talented. I think you always say hardworking and gritty, but it's not often you say like really high soccer IQ. Not to say that they don't have a high soccer IQ, but Sargent shows like unbelievable movement. Like his movements are so incredibly efficient, and he gets into really good spots. I mean, he's just constantly assisting, scoring goals. So I'm really curious to see how he links up with Aaronson and Pulisic right next to him.
Yeah, with regard to Josh Sargent, for those that don't know, if you're into expected goals for all you stat geeks out there, he is second in the championship with expected goals, which means he's just getting himself in good positions, which really lends itself to what you're saying, Grella, that his movement, right, and creating space, and whether it's creating space for others. I mean, he's already got a couple assists this season, which is more than he's had in quite some time. And maybe that's the system of a new coach, but I've really been impressed with his movement as well, and I'm curious to see how he's utilized under Mauricio Pochettino. Now, here's a fun fact for you. Charlie Davies quizzed me a couple of podcasts ago about the player that played the most under Mauricio Pochettino. And that player was Christian Aaronson, which is a bit of a surprise because you think Heung-min Son or Harry Kane or a number of other players. Christian Aaronson probably wasn't in my top 10, though I wasn't thinking all that hard about it. But there's something about that kind of holding midfielder, deep lying playmaker that he likes. So you see Busio now that's got called into camp. I wonder if he's going to get an extended look because he kind of fits that role a little bit. He might not be on paper the best athlete per se, but the guy can think the game and he can make a game from a deeper position. Do you think we'll see a Busio potentially in this Panama and or Mexico game?
It's possible. I think Pochettino is going to want to see as many looks as he can at all the different players that he's bringing in and what they can bring. It's really important, I think that he probably knows this, is not to just look at the player and say, oh, like, well, Aaronson is like obviously a top player and he needs to play. It's like there's triangles all over the field. Like if you go back to that lineup, you can just draw triangles all over it. And those triangles, those relationships of like understanding how a guy's going to play and what he's going to do, that's almost more important than how talented the player himself is. Like making sure that those triangles really understand each other. And I think what he's going to try to do is get Busio into that midfield triangle. And then, of course, you can draw a triangle from the center backs as well with him and see what works best, right? So Busio doesn't necessarily need to be more talented than, let's just say, Aiden Morris, but he might fit better. So that's the important piece. And Pochettino is going to have to move around a lot of things to find out what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, if it was about the best players, I probably wouldn't have gotten a sniff with the national team. I was in the intangibles department, Mike Grella, right? I brought something to the table that made me help the team elevate how we were going to perform, and I appreciate all the coaches that gave me a chance. All right, we're going to take our first break of Call It What You Want. When we come back, we're going to hear from Mauricio Pochettino some of his thoughts about the player pool in particular. Don't go anywhere. All right, Grella, this is the time. It's Call It What You Want After Dark, but it's really in between breaks on the Golasso Network, where we take a question from our amazing chat and amazing community, and we extrapolate on that for about 90 seconds before we have to go. Well, we come back, obviously, but back on the Golasso Network. So Cyrus says, hot take, Richards is not our center back for the future if we want to be like a top 10, top 15 country in the world. Cyrus coming in hot. Chris Richards... I'll go first as the resident center back here on Call It What You Want. Grella, I would say that there's still a lot of room for growth for Chris Richards. I know he wore the captain's armband against New Zealand. That's a step in the right direction because we need our younger center backs to start organizing everybody in front of them. And I still feel like they're just worried about how they're performing right now. And I don't see a lot of that going on. And the way I can pick up on that when I watch, it's just how the team is moving, or how are we solving problems when things aren't going well? That's not happening quick enough. When Canada was overrunning us in certain areas, like there should have been some identifiable solutions that have nothing to do with the ball and everything to do without the ball, right? How are we moving? Where are we? How are we solving problems in real time? So I think Chris Richards and others need to kind of figure that part of the game out. And once we do, then we're going to be in a much better position to be a top 10, top 15 country consistently. You agree with that, Mike Grella?
I agree with you, Jimmy. And listen, I don't know if it's just bad luck or what, but every time I've watched Richards, he's just like getting pulled into spots where I'm like, where's he going? Why is he going then? Why is he not waiting? And when you look at center backs and when you look at really good center backs in the game of football, you want to know, okay, in possession, what do they do? Do they break lines on the dribble? Do they break lines with their passing? Obviously, are they athletic? Are they strong? Are they good in the air? I think these are all important components. I think he has all these things. But
intangibles. It's the intangibles.
Yes, but I just don't like center backs that just lock in and fly into the midfield all the time. There's a real important aspect of like knowing when to go, not
right.
to go.
I agree with you.
We've been spoiled. Obviously, I've been spoiled with watching Barzagli and Chiellini and Bonucci, and these guys are just like up. It's all up here. I know there's a lot of physical attributes, but it's all up there when you're playing that center back position.
Defending's a lost art. That's all I'm going to say. All right, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back in to Call It What You Want, your favorite Average to Good podcast. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside our special co-host for today, Mike Grella, as he's known in many parts of the world because of his superstar skills. And we hinted and teased before the break that we got some good sound bites from Mauricio Pochettino. But before we get to him, some big news about Tyler Adams, Mike Grella. They are reporting Andoni Iraola, the coach of Bournemouth, is reporting that he's back at training and that he might feature in some upcoming games. I hope that's true. This is Andoni Iraola said he's coming from a period of 18 to 20 months where he's played very little football. But I will say in that very little football, Mr. Senor Iraola, he scored an absolute banger against Mexico. So he can take as much time off as that he wants. But he continued. So we cannot rush anything. He's completed all the checks and is ready to train with the group. I hope he's going to help us for the Arsenal match. I hope so too. Tyler Adams, obviously a vital piece of the puzzle from my perspective for the U.S. men's national team because of those things that we're talking about we want to see from our center backs, right? He's got leadership. He's got grit. He holds people accountable. He covers a ton of ground. He lifts the game of people around him. So when he's not on the field, I think it shows, Grella.
Yeah, Tyler Adams was at Red Bull when I was at Red Bull. We were a couple times. We were roommates because Jesse wanted to mix the older guys with the younger guys.
All right.
I'll never forget him coming in. I think he was 15 years old and coming in and training with the first team. And he came into the meeting room where we were. And I was just thinking to myself, where does this guy think he's going? Like, he's 15 years old. He was so frail and small. And we had Felipe in the locker room as well, who's Brazilian, Italian, and we he was the midfielder at the time, still playing, great player, a great personality as well. But he would always give it a little stick to the younger guys, and he gave some stick to Tyler once, and I don't know how it ended up that way, but they started wrestling, and Tyler choked him out. Tyler was 15 years old, 16 years old.
I love that.
In the hallway after the meeting room, he choked him out, and the whole team's watching and enjoying it as you do it in the locker room. And I remember thinking after that, then I watched him. He trained with us, and I watched him, and he had just so much bite and so much personality. And at 15, 16, I was like, wow. I was very impressed with him after one session. Obviously, as then he started to work his way into the team, we would post at Red Bull. We would post after every single game how much ground we were covering. Jesse was huge on that. Wanted to know exactly how much ground we covered. And almost the more ground you covered, the better it was. And we would cover a lot of ground. And then there was just one name that was way above all of us. And we were thinking about, we were covering much more than the average, because that was our way of playing. And he was way above us. And the one worry I always had for him, and I think I've had this conversation with him, was, well, sometimes it's possible you can run too much. And it's possible that game after game, and in long seasons, especially in English football, you can run into walls. Your body can just run into walls. And I think he's had that for the last 18 to 20 months, like it said in the quote there, that he's just, if he could find a way to just be a little bit more clever. And Tyler Adams fans probably not going to want to hear this, but it's what makes him great is that the ground that he covers and his attitude and the way he can snap people and tackles, and he brings so much personality to the group. He's a fearless guy. But if he can find ways to pick when he goes and where he goes and how he goes, I think he'll have a really good career. And I think the men's national team need Tyler. I think he's a very important piece. So praying that he stays healthy. I'm a big fan, obviously, and I hope that he can get going again.
Well, they say sometimes your biggest strength is also your biggest weakness, and finding that savvy, I think, is probably be his biggest challenge. But his body's probably telling him already giving him messages like, "Hey, buddy, we're gonna have to figure out another way to have success, because I can only do so much tracking. You don't want to end your career at 25 or 26 because you can't run anymore." And honestly, when you're hearing about players that have surgery on hamstrings or their lower back, that's a red flag for for a potential short future past that. So to your point, I'm a huge fan. Tyler's great. I think he's vital for the U.S. if we really want to be a top team, because he just does so much, and I really love what he brings to the table, both on and off the field.
Jimmy, in 2 seasons, he ran more than I ran in my entire 12-year career, for sure.
That's amazing.
It's got to be close.
That's amazing. Yeah, but you had a 10-year career, right? Because you were smart and thoughtful about how efficient. And I brought this up before, and I'll bring it up here just to tie this little bow on this conversation. When I had a chance to play against Real Madrid in Madrid at the Bernabeu, Zidane, R9 Ronaldo, Roberto Carlos, Beckham, all those guys, Raul, those guys don't waste energy when they run. They just don't. They're so efficient in how they move.
Such a good point, Jimmy.
That's what I took away from my 90 minutes. I'm like, I can't believe how efficient these guys are individually, and then of course collectively. Like, they're so smart in how they trap and how they press. And dude, I could do a whole podcast just on that 90 minutes that I played. All right, let's talk about Mauricio Pochettino, because he sat down with CNN Deportes to talk about our player pool, and I think he had some pretty interesting thoughts. Take a listen to this. Oh, actually, sorry. It's me reading a quote. I thought we had some. That was a nice buildup, though. Fair play, huh? Everybody was ready on their toes at the edge of their seat. Okay, so Pochettino said this. There are players in Europe that don't play much and don't compete. And there are others in MLS or in different leagues that do compete. And perhaps those players are in better shape to perform than those who don't compete on a weekly basis. And that was an interview he did with CNN Mexico. Your thoughts on that? Because like we saw with Jurgen Klinsmann back in the day, he broadened the player pool. Now, his broadening of the player pool either went down to college to get Jordan Morris, or he went over to Germany to get Jermaine Jones, or whatever, right? He broadened the player pool. And I think broadening the player pool is only a good thing, because then more players have, or feel like they have, an opportunity to break in if they're playing well. Your thoughts on him, including MLS, because at times, Grella, there's a lot of, for lack of a better phrase, Euro snobs that don't want to see MLS players in our player pool at all.
Yeah, I think for me that what I take from this is not necessarily MLS versus Europe. But what I take from it is the competition for spots. Like, I understood almost immediately when I started playing at Leeds was that the competition for spots and playing time is so high that that's what you need as a manager. You have to give the manager a headache, and that's what pushes the quality forward, I guess you could say. And when there's no competition for spots, when you have 2 or 3 or 4 bad performances and you still keep getting called in, it's not good for anyone. It's not good for the team. It's not good for yourself. Right. You need to be pushed from behind at all times. I mean, the players are playing so many games, and it's not easy. So I think healthy competition within the squad is important, and you need to be playing. There's only so many guys. I mean, I look at this roster, and maybe it's Pulisic and maybe 1 or 2 others that get a pass. That maybe if they're not, maybe they're having a rough 2 or 3 months and not playing, or injury or whatever, maybe they get a pass because these are building blocks for the team. They're such important pieces. Everyone else has to be held to the standard. Now, whether it's MLS or whether it's a championship or wherever it is, you have to be playing football week in and week out, regardless of your level of talent, because then guys know where they stand. Wherever how much you brought in that pool, guys know where they stand. Okay, well, if I'm not playing enough and I'm not playing well enough, I know that I'm not going to get it. But when guys don't really know where they stand, and that goes for guys that are not playing and guys that are playing, then it gets really tricky. It gets tricky with how hard you have to push. Do you have to give more in the games? Do you have to give less in the games? It becomes really tricky when you don't really know how the metric is, like how to get into the team. So I think if he lays it out and says, listen, if you're playing and you're playing well, regardless of where that is, you're going to be into the team. And if you're not playing well, you're not going to be in the team, which is essentially what he said. I think that is the most fundamental, important change that I've seen. You have to perform. You're only as good as your last game. You have to perform. I don't know many countries out there that are successful in international football that don't perform at the highest level week in and week out for the European team and then getting called to the national team. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, I think James Rodriguez would be the only counter to that, because he doesn't seem to do much at the club level, but it's an absolute boss.
But again, Jimmy, there's the guys that get passes. There's like
of course,
of the world that get that. Obviously, you're going to call Pulisic in no matter what, if just already what he's competent in a game. Maybe McKinney is there as well, but then the rest you have to push to get into your team week in and week out.
Well, I bring up Hamas because every time he does put on his national team jersey, the guy performs. So it's not like you're bringing him on. He's not doing anything, right? He's still out there performing. I'm actually going to bring people into some of my vulnerabilities right now and give a recent example as to why I think this is important that Mauricio Pochettino is setting these ground rules and laying the foundation for this. And it was TST. Okay, so last time in TST, the 7v7 soccer tournament for the $1 million winner, last year I played in it, the first year of it. And I was good. I was sharp because I was fit and I was ready to go. Leading into TST this time around, I know this is going to feel a little bit like I'm going off topic here, but I'm not. I'm going to bring it back. I promise. But this time around in TST, I broke my foot. So for the 5 months leading up to it, I was in a boot. And then I got there and I wanted to play. I had a week. I got a shot into one of my nerves. I'm cool. I'm good to go. But I wasn't sharp. And yes, I played in a World Cup, and I've got all the playing experience, and a lot of the guys on my team don't have that same thing. So from a playing background, I played at the quote-unquote highest level. I should be on the field. Let's leave age out of it, okay, all you ageists out there. I was sharp the year before. I wasn't sharp this time around, and I didn't play well, and I hurt my team. But my ego was in the way, right? And if you have big egos that are out there, or if you have a player who's not playing a lot, but expects to get called in, and when he gets called in, he expects to play. I'm telling you, you have to be playing all the time to stay sharp. It didn't matter what my playing experience was. I just wasn't sharp on the ball. When you're not sharp, you lack confidence. You're not doing the things that you know that you're good at. And I bring that up because it's super important. So it doesn't matter where you find your players. If they're going to come in and be sharp and you give them the opportunity and they make the most of that opportunity and they fit the team the best, as we talked about before, and they're going to fit into those triangles that Mike Grella was talking about, that lends itself to having a good collective team performance on both sides of the ball, then honestly, I don't give a shit where they play. If they're good and they're going to fit the system and they're going to play well and they're going to give everything they can for the team and they make the team better, that's what I'm here for. MLS, Liga MX, somewhere in South America, Africa, Europe, it doesn't matter. If they're a good fit for the team and they help, that's what matters the most. So we should broaden our player pool to make that happen. And I'm done with that particular topic.
Jimmy, man, I've got firsthand experience with this. Like when you play in England, obviously you play so many reserve games. You go playing Grimsby away, in the middle of January, and we're playing guys that probably are not going to play professional football much longer. 17-year-old kids that they're never going to make it. Not very good footballers. And we'd go there. We'd show up with the Leeds first team. Sometimes you'd have 4 or 5 players in the first team. And we'd get beat, man, because we just didn't really want to be there. And we kind of thought, oh, well, we're so good and we'll just pass it around and this and that. And those kids are playing for their lives. And I got to tell you something. I'll take the guy that's playing for his life over the talented guy that's in neutral in second gear all day long, because there has to be this, like Pochettino is already saying, this has to be a level of intensity that is the bare minimum. It has to be really high.
And to that point, and I love that example, you still want to find balance within that, right? I mean, having 11 hard workers, though hard to break down, might not win you a lot of games. It might be a lot of 0-0s in there. But so I think there is a balance that's why you bring in a top coach who can figure out what that balance is. But I love that there would be room for the guys that they come out and they work and they push and they're trying to make everything better and they hold themselves accountable, holding everybody else accountable.
Jimmy, we lost games to guys that are like custodians right now, man. Guys that are like
custodians.
Like we did, because it just that there's that level of commitment and desire that sometimes you just don't have. And people also people tune into a game and they watch a professional footballer play, or you watch or any sport, and they sit there for that moment and they make a judgment on the performance. But also it's difficult to find motivation every single day. These players now are playing 60, 70 games a year. And it's the prep and the night before and the travel and the warm up and everything that goes into it. So you do have to also give some leeway, but you got to find a way when you put the national team jersey on, you got to find a way to be at your best.
Yeah, 100%. And I love these examples that we're giving. Hopefully it's connecting some dots. Hopefully the player pool is listening to this, and the coaching staff, of course. We know that we're one of their favorite podcasts. Make sure you hit like and subscribe. Okay, so I put together a list of 5 MLS players, just to bring it back to MLS, that I think Mauricio Pochettino should be keeping an eye on. And here are the 5 in no particular order. Okay, number 1, Matt Freese. He is goalkeeper for New York City FC, and he's had a fantastic season. Been very solid, making big saves at the right time. And because our goalkeeper situation seems a little up in the air, hopefully Matt, I almost said Matt Reese. I played with Matt Reese for a long time, but Matt Freese. We got Diego Luna, who's got 7 goals and 8 assists for Real Salt Lake. Now, obviously talking about representing Mexico at some point, and we don't want to lose him there. I really like his game. I think he's got a different player profile than what we have currently in our player pool, so I'd love to have him come in. Luciano Acosta, even though he is not naturalized as a U.S. citizen yet, it's looking like that'll happen in the beginning of 2025. So that guy puts up incredible numbers for FC Cincinnati and clearly has a great brain and for the game and incredible talent. So if he's available, I know he's a little bit older, but I'd give him a look. Why not? And then you have Georgi Mihailovic, Colorado Rapids, came back from AZ Alkmaar in the Eredivisie after playing for the Chicago Fire. Now he's back with the Rapids. Rapids doing well under Chris Armas. He's got 11 goals and 10 assists, so doing it in multiple different ways to have some goal-scoring contributions. And then Nathan Harriel, who played right back for us at the Olympics, plays for Philadelphia Union, and I think he's got a couple goals and a couple assists getting up and down the right side. But because our right back situation is still in flux as well, these are the 5 players that I think that Mauricio Pochettino and his coaching staff should look at from MLS. I'm curious what everybody else thinks. Hit us up at Golazo America on social media. Hit us up in the chat right now if you were watching on the YouTubes. Grella, any other names you should add to that? You like those? You like that list or what?
I like that list a lot. Obviously, I was at Cincinnati. We were doing some scouting when we brought Acosta in, and everyone I spoke to in the lead up to bringing him in was just like, there was usually you go and ask about a player and you get like I don't know, 8 good things and you get a couple bad things, right? You're always going to get some negative. Like everyone was just like, sign him. He's incredible, and then he's gone on to do obviously incredible things. I think it goes back to the conversation a little bit we had before with Pochettino. He's gonna have to see, like, okay, which piece of the puzzle are we missing, or which piece do we need is super important that we can plug in. I think that's more important than just the performances and just the talent level. He's got to look at guys in the MLS as well and say, look, this is a guy we can use. Like Acosta is such a unique player, regardless of his age. I think you have to give him a look once he gets whatever his papers that he needs or whatever. But I think you have to give him a look because there's not many players like him. So he's important to make sure they include players like that. Obviously, Luna's still young. You go back and say, you know, this maybe his bottom line is not that high yet, but definitely another player that I don't think there's a lot of American players that bring his skill set. So has to find the piece of the puzzle, but there's a lot of good guys that you can put on that list for sure.
Yeah, Luciano Acosta. I mean, listen, 30 years old, 5'3", diminutive playmaker, cute as a button. I've got plenty of time for him, and I hope that Mauricio Pochettino gives him a chance. Because why not? Why not just broaden our player pool? And once he gets his green card and gets naturalized as a citizen here, why wouldn't we give him a shot and see how he fits in with everybody else? That's what I'm saying. All right, we're going to take our next break. Call it what you want. When we come back, we're going to get into more of the good stuff because that's what we do on your favorite Average to Good podcast. Hey, everybody. What's up? Welcome back. This is the Call It What You Want in between commercial breaks on the Golazo Network After Dark special. We got a question. We don't know who it's from yet. This is going to be a big surprise from us. Martin O'Malley. What's up, Martin? He says, what are the best moves for Turner, Horvath, and Gio if they want to play for Pochettino? Mike Grella, take it away.
Yeah, the best moves, I mean, you just got to get to a team where you're going to be the number one. I think they probably haven't ironed that out. I made a similar mistake in my career in general. I think the most important thing I could tell a 16-year-old, 17-year-old, 18-year-old when they're making a decision is don't even look at the money. Don't even look at the club. Just make sure you're playing football at a pretty decent level. And I don't know if they've done that. I don't know if they've had those conversations or if they were lied to or if they thought they could get into the team and then didn't. But they have to find a way to play football because aside from Pulisic, like we say, if you're not playing week in and week out, you're going to find yourself outside of the team.
Okay, that's the goalkeeper situation. What about Gio Reyna? Because I feel like there is some, I mean, even Matt Turner came out and said, I want to stay in the Premier League, which I get. I would want to stay in the Premier League as well, but the sacrifice to that is you're not going to be playing. And now you got a national team coach who's saying, if you're not going to be playing, well, then you're out of luck because I'm going to go with players that are playing. So this becomes a little bit of an interesting, let's say, I don't know if it's a January transfer window move or a summer one, but I do think it's an interesting time. Gio Reyna, though, what are your quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, well, Jimmy, to go back to what you say in a second, I think that, they feed each other, right? Like if you're not playing for the national team and you're not having good seasons, then it like kind of can snowball easily in the wrong direction. Obviously, if you take a step back and you're playing week in and week out, get back into the national team, that can pick you back up as well. With Gio, I think the obvious fit and the obvious goal in covering Serie A would be to go to a Serie A team, because I think it really suits the way that he plays football, and I know for sure we would love to have him because he's also another player that's unbelievably unique.
All right. There's a lot to unpack with that one, but we only had a couple, 10, 20, 30 seconds. We're going to take our next break, a little short break, because we got to get back to the Golasso Network, and then we'll come back and hang out with everybody on whatever channel you're watching this. Welcome back in to Call What You Want. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside Mike Grella, and we are getting after it. A little preview, a little update on what's happening with the U.S. men's national team with their first camp under Mauricio Pochettino. Now, leaving that aside for a second, the current coach of the U.S. men's national team. Let's go to the former coach of the U.S. men's national team, Gregg Berhalter. Grella, he just got hired. Your former coach of the Columbus Crew just got hired with the Chicago Fire. I kind of have questions. Do Columbus and Chicago not like each other? Is that like a rivalry that you shouldn't cross the line to go to the Fire if you used to coach the Crew? Hold that thought, though. Gregg Berhalter comes back into it, head coach and sporting director. And that's a role he also enjoyed with the Columbus Crew. I believe you guys got to 2 finals. I say you. I don't know if you were on that team. The 2015, they made a run to the MLS Cup final. They hosted that one. Didn't go their way. The Timbers ended up beating them 2-1. But he did reach the playoffs in 4 of 5 seasons. I believe the Chicago Fire have only done that once in the last 20 years. So he's got nowhere else to go but up. This is actually a pretty good situation, I think, for him. This is the start of the Gregg Berhalter redemption tour, as he finds himself back into getting into the good graces of fans. I like this hire from Chicago. It's a guy that knows the league, knows the player pool, knows how this league is set up in particular, and clearly has had success at this level. So I'm kind of curious to see how we can turn this around, because Chicago's not very good.
Yeah, well, obviously sitting in last in the East now, but with Berhalter, Chicago really lucky to have him, especially in the position that he's in, where he can really build something and he's going to be given time to build something. I think the biggest flaw is, and like I said earlier, like when I spoke about Berhalter and said what I'm only telling my experience of what it was like to play for him, and sort of how hard he worked and how efficiently he worked at what he did. But I think
wait. Time out, Grella. But to your point about Tyler Adams, is he overworking? Is he overcoaching at times?
So I'll give you one example of like the amount of detail. Like he's got a guy that's job is just to track every single player and how much he's running and how much muscle fatigue he has. So there'll be days where like you're in the middle of training, you could be like 40 minutes into training and he pulls you out. And there'll be other days where you're like an hour and a half into training and they're like, hey, training's over. They're like, Grella, let's go. We got to go and do some doggies because you haven't done enough, or whatever it may be. So attention to detail is incredible. I think why he probably was not that good at with the national team. And listen, I don't want to say he was not that good, but that why he was pretty average with the national team is because he didn't have the time to implement all these things. I mean, at Chicago, he's going to be given time. He's going to be given total control to do what he wants. And I think Chicago are going to be really lucky to have him. And like you say, nowhere to go but up. But he's not going to accept anything but a playoff spot and a run in the playoffs. And to go back to that graphic you showed in 2015, I was on the wrong end of that. He was they beat us actually in the semifinal to go on to the final.
Interesting. So I can see where your bitterness comes from. No, I will say that you explained that example, and I really want to know how I can apply for that job to be the one that's tracking fatigue of all the players. I would honestly be sitting in a lawn chair just doing the eye test. Like, yeah, that dude's not working hard enough, Greg. Hey, Greg, I have a bullhorn. Hey, Greg, Grella's not working hard enough.
I got to tell you, Jimmy, I felt like sometimes he was, man, because there'd be days that I was dead and he'd be like, all right, we got to do another 20 minutes. I'm like, you nuts? And then there would be days where like, I felt like great, and he'd be pulling me out. So I didn't listen. I'm not saying I like all the sort of attention to detail, but he does do it. I mean, we're doing like saliva tests every single day, weight tests every. I'll never forget, Jimmy.
Okay.
I came in a pound and a half heavy one day. I don't know. Had an extra plate of pasta. My dad was in town or something. I don't know. Had maybe a couple beers, and they like pulled me in and were like, "Dude, what's going on? Like, you're a pound and a half too heavy." Like that kind of attention to detail.
Well, what's interesting is you going to have a beer with your dad who was in town is probably incredibly important for your emotional and mental stability, right? And just being like a normal human.
Yep.
And I don't see anything that you're talking about or hearing anything that you're talking about that evaluates that side of things, that you just want to be normal for a day.
Great point.
So that's where I would counter all this. All that information is important, but you still have to have that balance to make that happen. So how you utilize that and not to say he was shaming you for that pound and a half, but it kind of sounds like he was shaming you for that pound and a half.
No, yeah, you know what, Jimmy? There was just so many metrics, and like you say, we were tracking sleep, we were tracking hydration, we were tracking. We would do a jump test every morning, a hamstring test every single morning. And there's metrics for all this stuff, but the most important metric is the one you said that we don't have really a tracking system for, is the mental, like. And I'm not talking about the mental toughness of the game of football. I'm talking about, are you happy in your everyday life?
Yeah,
what's your life like off the pitch? And are you enjoying yourself and you're enjoying your life? Because I felt this way, that when I was in a good mood and life was good off the pitch, I was playing really well. And when it wasn't, people have other stuff going on in their life that's in perspective probably much more important than football. When that's not right, then those metrics, you could tell
they don't matter.
All the metrics in the world, they don't matter. The emotional one is so underrated.
They should have had a non-Gregg Berhalter controlled, like 3 buttons. You know when you go to a bathroom at an airport and you have to press which button that you're satisfied with? That's what they needed on the way out. Like, were you satisfied with Gregg Berhalter's coaching today? And you could push the button. Listen, I also think that there's an underlying message of trying to be perfect. Like when you have all those metrics and you're being judged on those metrics every single day, I understand from a coaching perspective that you are trying to maintain a high standard and a level of professionalism that you want to see exist day in and day out. I totally get that. And I respect that. However, there's also an underlying, probably unspoken messaging of, dude, I got to be perfect or this guy's going to be all over me. And I don't know how healthy that is either. Obviously, he's had success with it. Columbus had some success when he was in charge and got to 3 finals during those 5 seasons or whatever it is. But something to take into consideration. And we'll see if he's adapted and molded and evolved since his time at Columbus. Obviously 6 years with the national team. I'm sure he's evolved in some capacity. All right, we're going to take our last break of Call It What You Want. When are we going to come back? Well, we're going to come back. I don't know why I said it like that. But when we come back, we're going to talk about the Nations League final. And apparently both finals are going to be in LA, which I'm totally cool with because that's where I'm from. Don't go anywhere. Whoa. Hello, YouTubers. How's everybody doing? This is the In-Between Breaks on the Golasso Network. Here's our question from the most amazing community out there. Cyrus again. Cyrus gets 2 questions. Wow, we're giving some real special love to Cyrus. Is there any chance we get out of the 4-3-3 for these first friendlies? Mike Grella, I'm going to say no, because if we got into a back 3, we would need 3 center backs that Pochettino would be happy with, and I'm not sure he's going to find that, at least in these first 2 friendlies.
Jimmy, the most important thing, one of the cool things that I've read with Ancelotti is like he looks at what he has and then builds the team based on that.
Exactly.
It's like you go into your fridge and you want to make like a steak sandwich, but you just got peanut butter and jelly and like you just can't, right? And so I think with what we have in the roster that we have, I think the 4-3 pretty much fits. And people get like so bogged down with tactical formations. I mean, if you really stop and freeze frame tactical formations, there's so many frames where they don't look like a 4-3-3, and then there's so many frames where they'll look like something else on either side of the ball. So right. I wouldn't get too sort of hung up on the way they're going to play. I think the big one is, do you play with 3 center backs or 2 center backs? That's pretty much the big changing factor of how tactics look.
Yeah, and I'd also say when you're watching this game against Panama, how high are Jedi Robinson on the left side and Scally and or Fossey on the right? Like, where are they joining the attack? Where or how are we creating our width? Where's that width coming from? Is it from our wingers or is it from our wing backs or our outside backs? Those are the things that I think people should pay attention to. Where are we trying to create our numerical advantages? If Panama, they're going to be in a low block for a good portion of it. So how are we breaking down a low block? Is it hopeful crosses? Are we trying to go through the middle of the park when there's a bunch of people standing there? I'm very curious to see how we're going to solve some of those problems. And then obviously in transition, where are we trying to win the ball? Obviously it's going to be high intensity, as high up the field as possible. But once Panama does break through that first line of pressure, I'm very curious actually, and this is me being a super geek, like what does that next wave of pressure look like? They break our first line, and then how are we managing that situation? Maybe it's a 4v4 or 5v5. Where are we pushing the ball? Where are we trying to win it? Now, everything's fluid, right? And it changes based on the situation and who has the ball. But those are the little things that I'll be looking for that I think probably answer a lot of the questions about where we're trying to gain our advantages. All right, we got to stop down here on the Call It What You Want After Dark. We're going to come back to the Glosso Network, so don't go anywhere. Hey, what's up? And welcome back to Call It What You Want. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside Mike Grella, and we're getting after it here on the Glosso Network and on the Glosso America YouTube channel. And if you're not subscribed to that, what are you doing with your life? Please go make that happen. And we are going to talk about the U.S. men's national team because it looks like, Grella, they're going to be playing on the West Coast for a long time to come. The CONCACAF Nations League final for 2025 and 2027 have been announced, and they're in L.A. The semifinals and the final, I should say, SoFi Stadium. And as I mentioned before the break, I'm from LA, so I've got plenty of time for this. We have the Gold Cup in 2025 also mainly being played on the West Coast and nothing on the East Coast except for the FIFA Club World Cup, which doesn't include the US. But yeah, what do you think about SoFi hosting both of these finals?
I think it's an incredible stadium to go play two finals in. I think it's a hard one to say. How affected is the crowd and the team from depending on where we play? I know it's been a big topic of conversation. National team in Copa America played in Texas, Kansas, and Atlanta. I think aside from Atlanta, you would think that would help, but it hasn't. They've played in some places geographically that were colder than others to try to gain advantage. I think, look, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's a spectacular stadium to go watch a sporting event. And I think it definitely raises the level of the players in terms of like how nice that stadium is. SoFi is like one of the nicest stadiums you can play. And now like how packed it is going to be another story because obviously it's do you know how much it fits, Jimmy?
I don't, but if they play Mexico in the final, it's going to probably fit more than it has capacity for. So ultimately, though, we're hearing that it's CONCACAF's decision and not U.S. Soccer. So if you have any bones to pick with anybody, direct that right at CONCACAF. Okay, a couple more things before we let you leave and then give our predictions for this Panama game that's happening on Saturday. I want to plug a couple cool interviews that are happening with the Morning Footy crew. They got Gianluca Busio and Zach Steffen. Make sure you check that on the Morning Footy pod feed. Catch that or go on the YouTubes or on the Twitters to go make that happen. We also want to plug the Nicaragua and Jamaica are playing today at 10 p.m. Eastern, tonight, I should say, on the Glosso Network. And then Suriname and Costa Rica are playing on Friday night, 6 p.m. Eastern on the Glosso Network as well. All right, so let's get into our predictions. What are you saying, Grella? How is this? What's the final score? And then reverse engineer it. How is it playing out? We scoring early, scoring late? Like, who's scoring? What do you got for me?
So the overall record with Panama 17-3-7.
Yeah, but they beat us 3 in the last 5.
Correct.
I want to throw that out there.
Correct. So, but I think with the excitement of Pochettino getting there, with the roster that we have, I know there's been a lot of injuries, but the roster that we have, I could see an incredible link up. Like we spoke about earlier, the balance between the front four of Haji Wright, Pulisic, Sargent, and Aaronson behind them. I see them linking up really well. I see Sargent bagging one, probably assisting another, and I see them coming away with a 2-0 win.
You took 5 scoreline.
I think it's going to be better than you think on the first game. You know, like that feeling, new manager.
New manager bounce.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a real thing for a reason. There's a psychological effect that it has on your team. I agree with you. I think that Josh Sargent is going to have a significant impact in this game. He has to know that this is an incredible window for him to really put a stamp on the number 9 position, and how he's got an advantage right now over Balogun because Balogun's out with the dislocated shoulder. So this is a big chance for him, and I don't think he's going to give up that chance. I'm curious to see where Christian picks up the ball, how wide he gets inside. I think Brendan Aaronson's going to be excited. Got a lot of confidence, as you mentioned, with Leeds. I'm curious about the back four. Who's playing right back? Who's playing center back? Who's starting in goal for us? Lots of questions there, but I do agree with you that it is going to be a good game, and I do think we're going to respond in a positive way. Not only because we have a new coach, but we got to get la revancha. We need to get revenge after we lost to Panama in Copa America, which really hurt our chances of getting out of our group, and I'm still sad about that. So, Grella, thank you so much for your time and hanging out with us today. We appreciate you. You're the man.
Jimmy, anytime, dude. So much fun, man.
It was fun. I love your insights, and yeah, we got to have you back on a little bit more. For everybody else, make sure you subscribe to the Golazo America YouTube channel. Make sure that you follow Golazo America on all the social media channels. Everybody listening and watching, we really appreciate you and your support, and we cannot wait for Saturday's game. We're going to have a live reaction after that game ends on the Golazo America YouTube channel, so come back and join us for that. And we appreciate you guys. We'll see you very, very soon. Later, and let's go USA! Woo! USA!